Now let us proceed with the commonly misused words and phrases. This slide shows a list of the words which are quite common in the technical writings, especially for engineering research, and often being misused by the writers. These words have something in common, which they appear differently in singular and plural forms. Normally we use them interchangeably without considering whether it appears in singular or plural conditions, and normally when we want to use them, we choose the words which we commonly encounter without considering the singular or plural conditions. Of course, there are more which you can acquire from the internet. These are the common misused words which we normally encounter in the technical writings of engineering research, such as analysis, appendix, axis, basis, criterion, datum, focus, formula, half, hypothesis, matrix, medium, phenomenon, radius, research, self, stimulus, stratum, and thesis. Having this presented and discussed in this module, next time when we encounter these words, maybe we just pay attention in terms of the singular or plural forms and decide the right words to be used. And then there are also some words which are commonly confused and used interchangeably in our writing, especially for us as the non-native English speakers. Again, we take this as a reference, which in future when we encounter these words, we need to be careful with the proper terms to be used. For example, the advice here and the advice here, the differences in terms of the spelling will lead to different meanings in the forms of the nouns and the verbs. The next one, it will be the effect and effect. Effect means to influence. It is a verb. Effect is a noun. It means the result or to bring about something. Next, all together and all together. When you use all together, it means that it is in a group. All together, it means that entirely. Also, sometimes we use the term a lot, but what we actually mean is a lot. I believe there is no proper terms for this a lot. Next, we look at the alternate and alternative. Alternate means every other or every second terms in the series, and alternative means a choice between the two or more options. Next, continual and continuous. Continual means repeated over a period of time. Continuous, it means that without interruptions. We need to be careful with these two terms. Their meanings is quite close to each other. However, there is still differences in terms of its conditions. Next, different from and different than. Normally, the different from is commonly used in informal contexts. Different than will be more appropriate in the formal writing. Dependent and dependent. The first dependent here, it means subjected to. The second word here, it means someone who is given food, a home, or money by another person. That means if you have kids, your kids will be your dependent. Next, economic and economical. Economic is referring to the economy. Economical refers to saving. especially, specially. Especially is used to represent particularly. Specially is for special purpose. Infer and imply. Infer means to conclude by reasoning. Imply means to suggest. Inflammable, flammable, non-flammable. Both the word inflammable and flammables means easily set on fire. Only non-flammable means that it is not easily set on fire. As follows or as follow. The correct term it will be as follow. The followings are or the following are. The correct term it will be the following are. There shouldn't be an S here. Principle or principle. Principles means a general truth or law. Principles means chief. There are more. The data and datum. We have mentioned just now, both the terms here are referring to the same thing. Only one appears in the singular form, while another appears in the plural forms. Less and fewer. Less is used with singular and uncountable nouns, such as less information. However, fewer is used for plural countable nouns, such as fewer details. Rationales and rationales. Rationales means logical. Rationales means explanations. Then and then. I believe most of us are able to identify the differences of these two words. Only that when we write our technical writing, it ends up to be typing errors. Then is referring to a conjunctions linking and unequal comparisons. And then are adverbs of time or sequence. Rather than or instead of. Rather than is actually stating a preference. For example, rather than eating out, I prefer making dinners. What you see here, there are two options, which is either eating out or making dinner. The person here is stating a preference of making dinner as compared to eating out. And instead of is used to substitute one thing with another. It means that there will be only one thing is allowed out of the options. For an example, we made dinner instead of eating out. Both sentences here seems to be similar. The first one is talking about the preference between A and B, which one you prefer. As for the second statement here, it is stating that one thing is substituting another thing, which the writer will need to choose either one, but cannot have both running in concurrent. Next, we look at that and which. That is used to introduce a restrictive clause, while which can introduce a clause that is either restrictive or non-restrictive. The meaning of restrictive and non-restrictive, it is related to the specific information being disclosed as well as non-essential information being disclosed. To better explain this, let us look at these two examples here. Follow the format that the company recommends when you are writing reports. It is stated that which can be used under both conditions. Therefore, you can also use which in this sentence. Follow the format which the company recommends when you are writing reports. Let us look at the second sentence here. Follow the IEEE formats, which the company recommends, when you are writing reports. Both sentences seem to be similar. However, structure-wise, it is slightly different. If you look at the first statement here, follow the format itself is not specific. What format it is, which will be explained in the second half of the statement. That the company recommend when you are writing the report. Now the second half of the statement here is a restrictive clause. It is specific. It gives you specific informations to the non-specific information here, which is format. What kind of format should you follow? The format that the company recommends. And you see that there is no commas here. This will act as a sentence. And then if you observe the second statement here, follow the IEEE formats, which company recommends, when you are writing the reports. Now the format here is specific. It is specifically referring to the IEEE format, and which the company recommends. Now it is a non-restrictive clause. It provides non-essential information as an additional to the specific information given. Under these circumstances, there will be commas required. If you look into the statement here, you can simply remove the sentences between the comma without affecting the statement. Follow the IEEE formats when you are writing reports. The sentence is still correct. That means this one is actually giving an additional information. But if you look at the statement here, since the format here is not specific, you cannot simply remove these informations, as this will lead to ambiguity and queries of the reader what kind of format that you are referring to. Therefore, this will be the differences in terms of the usage of that and which. Next, let us look at the compare to and compare with. There is a very little difference between the two. When you use the compare to, it is actually to identify the similarities. The focus it will be on the similarities. And if you are talking about compare with, it is used to identify the similarity and or differences. That means it can be used to compare the similarity and also compare the differences. However, you need to know that when you use compare with, the focus are normally on the differences. Application wise, if you find it difficult, you can consider in this manner. When you want to compare the things which is the same, when the focus is on the similarity, you may use compare to. And when your focus is on the differences between two things, then you may use compare with. However, it is noted that the native English speakers normally use them interchangeably. That means they don't really care whether when to use the compare to and when to use the compare with. But if you really want to know the rules of English, this should be the proper one. And you know that native English speakers, they don't really mind. One more thing you need to know about this compare to and compare with. The compare to is a more common prepositions. If you are in the dilemma, do not know which to use, maybe you should use compare to all the while, and there shouldn't be any ambiguities arise within the readers. Next, we look at eventually and ultimately. eventually is used to refer after a period of time when these durations can be quite long and unknown period. The focus here it will be on the passage of time, and when you use ultimately, it is also referring to after a period of time, only that the focus here it will be the final results. It is as if no matter how long is the time, ultimately that will be the outcome. The interest it will be the final outcome. Next it will be when and while. Normally we use when to refer a specific point in time which is rather in short durations. For an example, when the phone rang, I was cooking. Cover your mouth when coughing. When I was a kid. When I was 16. The usage of when here is referring to a specific point of time, which is when the phone is ringing, or when you are coughing, which normally happen in a very short time, or you have a specific point of time, when I was a kid, or when I was 16 years old. And when you use the word while, it is referring to a duration of time, which is continuations and longer durations. For an example, while I was cooking, the phone rang. Eat healthy while recovering. While I was driving, I saw an accident. You see now while is focusing on a process. Therefore, you always see while and something ing. While I was cooking. While recovering. While I was driving. And then this duration of time is a continuation because you are cooking for some time, or you require some time to recover, or you have been driving for some time. Next is further and farther. Further is used for figurative distance. For an example, further informations, further questions. Farther is referring to the physical distance. For example, farther distance. Few and a few. Few normally refers to small quantity, which is the minority. Let's say now the percentage is less than 5%. For example, few members of the committees were there. That means only a small quantities of the member, very minor. Only a little portions of the members of the committees were there. When you use the term a few, it means that the number is small and some. For example, a few members of the committees were there. That means you are talking about several members of the committees were there. It is not referring to the percentage portions. Instead, it is actually referring to only a few members of the committees. Next, let us look at maybe, probably, and definitely. This is something interesting to know, as these three terms give you informations of different levels of likelihood. Maybe we can put it in a scale from 0 to 100%. 0% means that it's not going to happen. 100% means that it guarantees happening. And 50% is you're not sure whether it's going to happen or not. Maybe, perhaps, possibly, they are at this 50%. It implies that that particular event can happen and cannot happen. There is uncertainty there. But if you use the term definitely, that means that particular event must happen. Now the probably it would be somewhere in between this 50% and 100%. It means that it has higher chance than the possibly, but lower chance than definitely. That means you have a higher degrees of confidence level in terms of the likelihood. On that basis, you can describe an event in terms of the likelihood from definitely not going to happen to definitely is going to happen. Somewhere in between it will be probably not, and then with the better chances of yes or no, it will be possibly, perhaps, and maybe. And when you have higher confidence level, there is high chance of the likelihood, then you can go for probably. Next is the difference between say and tell. Say is a reported speech. For example, say something. What did you say to John? That means it is a conversation. Tell is for the direct speech time. For example, telling someone something, tell the truth. And then, although, even though, and though. All these three means the same, only the usage. Although it will be more formal, even though will be less formal, and though it will be casual usage. You may use them interchangeably, except when you put it at the end of the sentence. Only though is applicable. For example, I really like my supervisor. She can be strict, though. In this case, you cannot use although or even though here. Next is the differences between the should, must, and have to. Should is normally associated with advice, opinions, recommendations, but not an obligation. You should ask the colleague for help. That means the person is giving suggestions, which you may choose whether to comply or not. But if you use the word must, it is an obligation. You must finish the report by 5 p.m. That means no matter what, you have to comply. And have to is also an obligation. I have to complete this by today. That means no matter what, I will have to finish it.